I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Again, Ariel, you were on my show years ago when I was pregnant with my first baby. And I specifically remember this because I was having a really tough time with pregnancy and I had full on prenatal depression. I was just so sick all the time and I really wanted to cancel the interview, but it was too last minute, didn't want to be unprofessional. So I showed up and that one interview ended up really changing things for me. You ended up sending me the Muse headband. I started meditating twice a day, every day. I've been doing it ever since. And I and you shared a lot about your postpartum and just the conversation was everything I needed to hear. So I'm so grateful to have you back because I refer to that interview quite often.
Thank you, Melissa. That's so awesome to know. And I'm so glad that from that place you have been able to move forward and rebuild and love your mind even more deeply.
Yeah. And since then, Muse was really helpful in creating a meditation habit. I had recently read the book, I think it's called Peak, and it talks about deliberate practice. And it was the exact tool that helped me really see how to show up for meditation in a different way rather than just closing my eyes and letting my mind wander. And a couple months later, did the transcendental meditation training and I've done the advanced techniques since then. And so I know in our last interview, we went pretty deep on the basics of meditation. And so we're going to just pick up from there and see how deep we can go with it. And so I know that you've spent years looking at the brain in meditation. Is there anything that you've learned that has totally changed how you live?
Oh, that's an amazing question. Yes, there's lots of things that have actually changed how I live. So, in meditation, the first thing that I really got was the ability to observe my own mind, to gain that metacognition and see what I was thinking. And the next thing that I got that really relates to how the brain works is the ability to strengthen my prefrontal cortex. So I was somebody with, I have now learned many years later, undiagnosed ADD, which means all of those things that I was terrible at doing, like organizing and keeping my desk clean and being on time for things. All of that was a prefrontal cortex. I was going to use the word failure, but that's not very kind to myself. But that was a prefrontal cortex that was not as strong and capable as it could be. And, through my neuroscience research and all of the literature, it's really obvious that meditation strengthens the prefrontal cortex. And so in my life, I use not only the practice of meditation to strengthen the prefrontal cortex and teach me that I can be calm, that I can take space, that I can stop and think about things, that I can focus and attend. But I also use the recognition of the functions of my prefrontal cortex, like its ability to organize things and plan and sequence, like knowing that that's what my prefrontal cortex does, and knowing that mine was not as capable as I wanted it to be, really allowed me to think through different strategies and different methods to augment my prefrontal cortex and the skills that it needed and the strengthening that it needed to live life more effectively.
It is interesting when you think about meditation as practicing focus. I don't think everyone sees it that way. And since I first began trying to meditate, my cross country coach had us doing it way back in like 2000 and just being like, I don't think I'm good at this. I can't clear my mind and realizing so many of the misconceptions with meditation and how, the brain's going to brain its purpose, its function is creating thoughts. And so it's not necessarily about clearing it, although you do get to those states of kind of suspended transcendence. But just knowing you're going to think, things are going to pull you, and your goal is to just practice coming back. I come back to my TM mantra now, or coming back to the breath or whatever it is. And it's fun with the Muse headband because on my own, I'm just kind of realizing I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how long have I been thinking? Did I just go on a train of thought for 5 full minutes? But instead, the sound effects in the background will kind of increase the wind or or make the weather a little bit more tumultuous. And it's an immediate reminder to just kind of come back. And so I've found that I've been able to focus better and really train the mind better. But I've also been getting into the Gnostic Gospels lately. I've been going deep in the Gospel of Thomas, and I was just journaling on saying 27 yesterday, actually. And it said, if you do not fast from the world, you will not find the kingdom. And I love things like this because it's just like one more facet into my meditation. It's like, okay, I've been practicing focus, but now what happens if I really think about what it means to use meditation to fast from the world and to create space from the constant noise of mental activity? And for me, I think I need the evolution of the way I'm focusing on something to really keep it lively and exciting for me. How have you evolved with your meditation practice? What have been kind of the different stepping stones and how you look at it that has helped you go deeper?
Oh, so first of all, that's so much good fodder there. And yes, meditation at first for most people is not about focus. It's about the thought of like, oh my God, what's going on in my mind? Can I clear my mind? And when I started a meditation practice prior to building Muse, like 30 years ago, I wanted to try to learn to meditate, and I would sit down and I would just have too many thoughts in my head, and I would feel like this is not for me. I'm not capable of this. And it was through the journey actually of building Muse and using it that I recognized, just as you said, that it was not about trying to clear all the thoughts. It's observing your mind, observing that these thoughts are happening, and then making a different choice. And so the first step for me was noticing that I have thoughts, becoming okay with the fact that I can't get rid of them, becoming okay with the fact that they're going to be there and they're going to be bouncing around in my head, but that I have the choice of where to put my attention. So the thoughts are there, but I can put my attention to my breath. Eventually the thoughts will pull me again, and they'll want to rope me in, but that's okay. I can just let them go and put my attention back on my breath. And this simple exercise of focusing on my breath then allowed me to be able to sit quietly longer and longer, because part of having ADD is that you want to just like get up and run away. Like you have you have this like sense of a motor inside of you that's always like, okay, well, this was fun for 3 seconds. Now let's do the next thing. Let's just run away. Um, and so my practice evolved to be able to observe my body wanting to run, observe my away, observe my body wanting to do all of these things, and just be like, okay, well, that's happening too. Just like the thoughts are happening, the body's having stuff. We can see it happening, and then we can bring our attention elsewhere. We can see it happening, feel it happening, and not follow it, and just bring our attention elsewhere. And doing that, first working with the mind and then working with the body and the urges, brought incredible sense of like stability and stillness and strength and capability in my life, that I don't need to be pulled by my thoughts and feelings. I am just a me here and now. Stuff's going to come up around me, but that doesn't need to affect me.
Yeah, that's been a game changer for me too, because the more you practice it in meditation, the more you can take it out into your real life. And I used to think that it would be a superpower to collect all of my thoughts. I remember an app actually came out way down back in the day where it was like, how many times do you think of something to Google, but you don't have time to do it right then? This will just capture all the things you want to Google. And I was like, what a great idea. And I realized as I wrote them down, I never wanted to Google those things later. So maybe I should have just let it go instead of even downloading this $2 app and like collecting it there in the first place. And so often we think this next thing is important. And when I am not conscious of it, there's times where I wake up and maybe I check social media first thing and my day just ends up being like chasing my thoughts everywhere. Like, oh, I should do this thing while I'm in the middle of washing dishes. I have soap on one hand and I'm like looking up something over here, and it's miserable. And somehow our brains try to convince us that it's productivity when really it's just a complete lack of focus.
Yes. Yeah. This feeling that everything's important. And of course, if everything's important, then nothing's important. And part of it is the dopamine rush that we get from doing all of these things. It's like, ooh, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And each of those hits of novelty is very satisfying in that second, but ultimately corroding over the course of your life when you're trying to get somewhere or do something. And if you're not all moving, if all of you's not moving in that same direction, if you're just being pulled left and right, it can feel really hollow at the end of the day and like you didn't get anything done.
I think that's been one of my, I don't know, it's just the biggest challenges that I've worked through, or like one of the lessons that my soul came here for. I've always been a thrill seeker, from like getting certified in skydiving to just saying yes to things without thinking about the consequences, to spending my 20s doing like copious amounts of MDMA and then plant medicine, which I still think has a place, but just not in the way I was doing it before. And I can still feel that in me sometimes. I'm just like, come on, Instagram, give me a dopamine hit. None of these are good enough or whatever it is. And so that's why I appreciate that idea of fasting from it, because finding that really mellow bliss and realizing, if I can allow myself to get here, it's so much better than that. Because I don't think I can get those dopamine hits without that feeling of chasing. And then it's ultimately outside of myself, reliant on something else. And so I've felt some big shifts in who I believe that I am. And so I'm wondering, when you think of meditation, do you think of it as changing who we are, or more like uncovering who we already were?
This is such a good question that I've been thinking of as well. So as you're describing, the roaring 20s, and all the fun that we had and the things that we did and the experiences we chased, and then you move into the having kids zone and life gets much quieter. I mean, more crazy in the fact that you have kids that are pulling on you and wanting things from you and you want to give them all the time, but all of those spontaneous fun things that we used to be able to do when we were, kidless, are seemingly gone. And it sometimes leaves the sensation of like, void in your life. Like, oh no, like, where did that community go? Where did those events go? Where did that stuff go? Have I changed? Am I someone different? And for me, and I think for a lot of us, going through that, plus going through the pandemic, led to a greater sense of void and maybe a searching or desire for that. And the addition of a meditation practice through that growth and through that transition, for me, has allowed me to see like, wow, I feel like I'm someone very different now, but the person that I am now is somebody who is much more knowledgeable, much wiser, much more able to sit deeply with things, to listen deeply to people, to be happy with where I'm at in the moment, and to know that those things are still there available for me should I choose to want them on occasion. But I have a contentedness and a filledness with my life that is here before me, with my children, and on the one hand much more complex, but on the other hand much simpler experiences that I'm having. And so I think as we age, we shift and we grow and our personalities change, and that's a good thing. For a lot of us, we can be like, oh no, I'm growing older. I've changed. I'm turned into a mom. I've turned into a married person. I've turned into into an adult. And there may be a little bit of a crisis of consciousness of what we've lost through that transition. But hopefully what is replaced in the transition is the sense of deepening and growth and expansion of understanding, the not caring so much, the not needing to search and grasp for experience to fill our cup, because there is a satisfaction here and now. And the process of meditation really allows you to sit with those personality, I'm not going to call them changes, but evolutions and growths in a way that becomes expansive and meaningful and positive, rather than a death of something that once was that we still want.
Oh, for me, it has been a little bit of both. I think I didn't have kids until I was 35, and now I'm 40 and I'm pregnant with my third. And
Mazel tov.
thank you. It's been a journey, but I I think that had to be my path. I mean, I think what is anyway, so there's no point resisting it. But I didn't think I wanted kids for a while. I mean, the world shut down, and I joke, but also it was exactly how it happened, where I was like, we ran out of puzzles. Maybe we should have babies. But I knew I kind of wanted them, but I was having trouble like making that decision, and the world shut down and made the decision much easier for me. And so I was kind of grateful for that. Pandemic really ushered me into what I think I was meant to become. But I also think I needed to experience those couple of years before where I was still trying to do all the things that I did before that brought me joy, or at least thought it brought me joy, brought me exhilaration. And it just wasn't fulfilling in the same way. And I was like, oh, this is why people let go of that lifestyle, because it starts to become empty. And I was craving a deeper fulfillment. And so a lot of my growth has been understanding what true fulfillment is. Meditation has kind of helped guide me there in giving me the space to be with myself, which so many people don't do. I'm often saying, like, if you went on a date with a guy 100 times, but you're always just going to the movies and meeting right when it started and leaving right when it ended, you could spend 300 hours with him, but you wouldn't know him. And I think that's how we treat our relationships with ourselves. We might be with ourselves all the time, but if you're always reaching for other people for the answers, for other things, for the answers, for experiences outside, instead of really understanding that inner voice and who you are and what lights you up beyond what you've been told should, then how are you ever going to know?
Very, 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 very well said. And when you said the term fulfillment, the way you just landed there, it landed in me. Like, whoa, what is true fulfillment? And it's interesting as you're describing, getting to know yourself and asking yourself questions. I think for a lot of people that's really scary. And I can even like resonate if you told younger me to like sit down and journal. I might sit there for 3 seconds and then ask myself a question about myself and then feel like this is weird and awkward and I need to get up and run away. And so it is part of the maturation process that, and deeply what meditation taught me, that I can sit with myself and come to an uncomfortable question or an uncomfortable thought and stick with it and do the work and observe myself and be there and then journal about it or whatever it is. And it's not intuitive to be able to query yourself in that way and to be able to sit with yourself. It, like, I keep going back to, it really was through building Muse where I was sitting there writing something, and normally I would want to run away because it's like, oh, this gets hard, this is awkward, let's just go do something else, like throw this out. But in meditation and with Muse, I was sitting there and I was focusing on what I was doing. And with Muse, when your mind wanders, there's a little audio notification that says, hey, your mind's wandered, come on back to your meditation, come back to your practice. And so you practice the wanting to escape and then saying, nope, it's okay, I can sit here. And then wanting to escape, nope, it's okay, I can sit here. I can sit here, I can sit here. And through doing that, you train your mind body to be able to sit with the subject matter, to sit with yourself, to be able to be there and go deeper, and to know that that sensation that comes up of like, all right, let's escape, is just a fleeting sensation. And if you don't follow it, then over time, it starts to diminish. And over time, you can sit with the discomfort of being right where you are and being right who you are, and then get deep enough with yourself to be able to query that, to learn from it, and to then start to make changes and shift it or accept it, or whatever your own path is with it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the tools that have been helpful have kind of set me up for success, and then I've been able to release them in a way. And one of those that I thought was like that was, I mentioned plant medicine, but back when I was like 35, right before I got pregnant with my son, I was really craving a plant medicine experience. And I was like, but now I want to get pregnant. And it felt like, I was like, okay, this feels like a silly that I'm actually going back and forth. Like clearly it's the kid. And so I got pregnant, but I said at that time, just to make myself feel better, I think, okay, for my 40th birthday, I'll do a plant medicine retreat. I've always wanted to kind of do more than just one session. And so I had that on my goal list. And then 40 came around just this last May. And I held myself to it. And I actually had a lot of fear because there's so much more to lose when you have children. And it had been like 7 years since I had done that. But it ended up being one of the best experiences ever. My husband and I did it. And a funny thing that happened while I was there is, I mean, now we've got all these different AI tools, and I happened to get this Kickstarter. It's a little AI pendant that like records everything. And I was like, whoa, how cool would it be if this came into my session with me? And we were getting ready to do our first ceremony, and I was sitting there with it around my neck, and I just had this feeling. And I was like, no, I don't want to bring this tech into this experience. And I feel like that's so often my balance of I love technology. I built apps for years. I'm just a tech nerd. And so I love mindful tech. And so I'm curious for you, when you look at the balance of using tech, but also really going into the spiritual, for example, um, like mystical states, oneness, transcendence, out of body often register on brain scans. Do you think measuring them deepens the magic or takes something away?
So I think that there's a role for technology, and then there's always a time to kick it out and to not have it and to not use it. So for me, I do a ton of different kinds of meditation and self-relation practices. And like Muse, for example, is something that taught me how to focus my own mind. It taught me how to sit with myself in these practices. It has lots of different guidance that takes me places. And then sometimes you want to take it off when you're at a certain point in your journey to go deeper because you've learned the tools. It really is like, going to the gym. You're not going to go and run a marathon. You're not going to go and do extreme things if you haven't trained for it beforehand. And so to me, technology is a piece that can train you to go further. And then you have the supports that you need to go further on your own.
Mm, I like that. It's like, that's kind of what I did with my first experience with Muse. I used it for about 6 months, and then I did the transcendental meditation training. And then I was like, okay, let me try no technology for a while. But then I came back to it, and then I'll let it go. And right now I'm currently in my obsessed with Muse phase again. So I've been doing it twice a day. And I've noticed though, since the last stint of Muse, I'm so much better at it. And so it was kind of cool practicing without it, then coming back and seeing that I'm getting like 95% calm on many days. Whereas it used to really struggle to be in the 60%. But I was actually meditating this morning, and I knew our interview was coming up, and I don't even know what this question means per se, but the question that popped into my head was, how do you personally hold the paradox between data and the ineffable? And I was just like playing with that, and different visuals were coming up. And I'm wondering if anything comes up for you.
Okay, so data is just one slice of the pie. And okay, I'm a scientist. So I would always love to have data on everything because I would love to be able to know how it actually works. I desperately want to know the ineffable and, why is it that it works in these ways? Is there a collective consciousness that we can actually put some teeth to, that we can actually put some data around? Like, what are the ways that we can understand if and how these things really exist and be able to see them and have evidence around them? On the other hand, there's pure experience, and you don't need data, scientific data, to be able to have experience and to be able to go into deep places and to be able to have sensations of connection and growth. So, to me, data is an interesting tool to be able to enable further understanding, but On the other hand, no tool is as good as the human body and the human mind. The human and the body and the human mind can go to extraordinary places. And just like, driving a car, we can drive to the lake, and then you can get out of the car and stand at the lake and have this beautiful experience of the sunset. And then you can get back in the car and you can drive somewhere else to go skiing, and then you can take a lift to the top of the hill, and technology got us there, and then we can slide down our own without the need for anything else. you know it's like it can bring you to the water, and then you and your body and your mind can dive into it. And so I don't think we need to hold the data and the ineffable in our mind simultaneously. I think the ineffable can be expansive, can take up all of the space of our mind, and then at times we can return to data to give us deeper insight, to take us someplace else, and to switch the journey.
Yeah, I almost think of my mantra as a sort of technology. I've been really playing with
Yeah.
the idea that technology is more than just the computer hardware that we're used to claiming it as. I wrote a book this year and I talk about story as consciousness technology. And I kind of trace it through the history of how we used to use that, from the Eleusinian mystery schools to Jesus's parables. And it's been a really fun exploration. But when you really just think of technology as anything that creates an experience, or that can, yeah, somehow be a tool in helping you access something that you might not access on your own, then it opens up to just seeing like the technology of the universe. And when you get into some of those altered states, I don't think it's a coincidence that we tend to see geometry, sacred geometry, which is such a part of technology. How do you think of technology, consciousness technology, or technology outside of the normal way that we envision it?
Sure. So you could consider meditation to be an ancient technology. 2,000 years ago, when they went to query the mind and to try to move forward the human spirit and humans' efforts, they created meditation grew up in many different cultures simultaneously around the world. It was a methodology, it was a set of tools and techniques to observe the mind and to grow and develop the mind, body, spirit. And so you could certainly think of those early meditation practices that we still practice today as forms of technology before there was computers and ones and zeros to call technology. So I certainly can think about methodologies, and maps and landscapes and methods that you follow as kinds of technologies. Do I think about fractal geometries as a technology? Part of me thinks, well, our eyes, when we see images in our mind, we have uh, receptors in our mind, and we have like receptors for lines and receptors for angles. And so as we are being re-triggered with images, we are probably being re-triggered in those areas in our occipital cortex which detect lines, which detect angles, at specific relationships to one another. So I also think about the hardware, the connections in our brain, and the ways that they surface images and the ways that they feed thoughts to us. And so, although I don't think about the brain as a technology, I do think about the brain as hardware, which you can then load with software. Hardware, you have all the neural connections, and in it is software as an operating system and a methodology for the interaction of the parts, out of which arise ideas, thoughts, innovation, experience of self, experience of consciousness in the world. So I think metaphorically you can make those relationships quite convincingly.
Mm. A fascinating talk I saw you did was studying morality through the brain. What did you learn from that? Do you think that morality comes from neurons fighting or firing, or something deeper?
Oh, you asked the best questions, man. This is amazing. So That's a very, very, very hard one to answer. I mean, we can think about morality as something that evolved because it's really helpful to have societal interactions in which we don't kill each other, and then we create a set of rules that govern how we should act in order to have the best functioning societies, in order to societally have the best chance of success and survival. Um, maybe that is the origin of morality, or maybe that is the social structure that has reinforced the existence of morality. Or maybe there really is a part of our brain that directs us to act for some higher good, and a set of internal drives that desire us to have the drive to treat one another well, to make good moral decisions. And we certainly have much of our brain that is dedicated to positive social interaction and to loving and caring and supporting those around us. So, is morality something that is hardwired in the brain? I don't know, but I certainly know that the hardwiring that we have in our brain is influenced by our social interactions, which then lead to the development of what really are morally focused areas of our brain, that then get reinforced when we make good moral decisions and we want to exist as, moral humans. So is morality, deeply embedded, not just in our consciousness or in our social fabric, but also in the wiring of our brain? I would say the answer is yes.
That reminds me of one of my problems with religion in general. My Instagram is full of kind of deconstructing Christianity because that's how I was raised. And a big part of finding my spiritual path was unwinding some of the fears that I didn't even realize were fears because it was just taught to me as truth. But one of the things that comes up, because I went back and read the Bible to deconstruct, and I was actually kind of mortified going through the Old Testament. And it's like many people hold this book as divine truth or our guidance for morality, but God's morality seems to change depending on the time period. So in the Old Testament, God condones things like slavery and genocide and stoning someone for gathering sticks on the Sabbath, or like killing someone's family for looking back. And then later the message is love and forgiveness and turning the other cheek. And so to me, it doesn't really sound like the morality of an unchanging God. It sounds like humans projecting their evolving morality onto God. And so then when you zoom out, it's not as much like divine consistency, but more like human morality slowly maturing over centuries. And then that brings the question of what you just said. So if it's just from our brain, then why is it so different now than it was thousands of years ago?
Well, so what I was just talking about was the idea that we have a hardwiring that is influenced by our culture and by our society.
Yeah.
So, a hardwiring, some social proclivity inside of our brain, some desire to care for and love our child, which is very, very inborn to us and is important for our species to continue to exist. And then that circuitry that we have becomes matured and becomes evolved, just in the same way that we evolve learning different languages depending on where we were born. We have a language acquisition device in our brain. According to Noam Chomsky and his thoughts, we have this pre-existing hardware, and then how it is matured and tended and grown and evolved within our environment is individual, both individual to the individual and individual to the time and the society in which you were born. And it's super cool to see how we as a society have really developed. And the first laws were the Hammurabian laws, tooth for a tooth and eye for an eye. And, we considered that to be great morality. And then we evolve into recognizing, oh yeah, maybe we can actually suppress our base urges to just want to hurt someone because they hurt us, and take more evolved actions. And so, for one, totally agree with your idea here that perhaps these texts were written by people who were reflecting what was going on in their world at that time. And also kind of wonder what it is that we will evolve into. So, we tend to think that the moment that we're in is like clearly the height of humanity. Like now we know everything. We know so much more than we used to know. We're so much more evolved than we ever were. I wonder what our next century is going to be in terms of moral evolution, in terms of technological evolution, in terms of our capabilities, what we care about, what we think about. Invariably, it's going to be very, very different, probably even a relatively near future than it is right now.
I love that. Yeah, the Bible proves your point. But it's interesting too. There's just so many end times debates, literally like September 23rd, all these people on social media. There was like a trending hashtag rapture talk. People really thought the rapture was going to be happening. And I keep reminding people that people have thought the rapture is going to happen at every single moment in history, including when it was, well, back in biblical times. I was going to say when it was written about, but it's actually never mentioned in the Bible at all. It wasn't even popularized until the late 1800s. And then it was further popularized by the Left Behind series. So we're always just thinking that we are, like you said, at the pinnacle of everything. And now the times are going to end. And it's so interesting being at this period of time, especially with all of the AI and Elon's Neuralink and everything. And so I'm curious for you, where do you think, or what ethical red lines do you believe we should draw in neurotech so that it remains an ally instead of a tool of control?
Again, extraordinary questions. Okay, so I think there's a lot of ethical red lines that we need to draw and that we do draw, like as a company, and that we're really pushing the whole industry to draw. So in 2014, I started something called the Center for Responsible Brainwave Technologies. And there we created a set of guidelines with ethicists, with Ann Cavoukian, who is the head of Privacy by Design. And we created a set of guidelines that said neurotechnology should never impact people's privacy, their safety. It needs to always be efficacious, and it can't limit our agency. And to me, agency is the most important one. Like the other ones are all kind of obvious. Of course, it needs to be safe. It needs to be private. It needs to be effective. You can't lie about how it's going to fix you or what it's going to do. But it can never diminish our human agency. So that means that you can't have somebody use this technology to overtake you, to sell you crap that you don't need based on your brainwave state, to be able to take the information and use it against you, or to build something that you don't want. Like, we can never diminish our human agency with this technology. And I'm actually part of quite a number of initiatives. So the OECD created an initiative on neurotechnology. There's a group called Neurorights Organization. There's another group that I'm a part of, a very large legal working group, and we're all coming together to create a set of policies that all neurotech companies need to abide by legally. The first ruling came in the state of Colorado. There's now a Neurorights ruling that says that EEG data can't be used to identify you. And there's another one that came in Chile. And so we're really pushing for not only companies to make sure that they're good actors, but to really make policy changes to make sure that neurotechnologies like, cochlear implants too. I mean, there's a lot of neurotechnologies that are used in the medical space every day to improve people's brains and their chance of living longer, as well as neurotechnologies used in wellness. And we want to ensure that these technologies are always used in ways that are supportive to our human nature and our human needs, and not the opposite.
I love those. I really appreciate the ones about not using your brainwaves to sell you shit you don't need.
Yeah, it was like a basic tenet from day one.
It's like I'm on Instagram and every third post is an ad now, and I love all of the products. I'm just like, I need to delete this. I'm pregnant. You know how to sell me right now. And so I'm just trying to stay away. But it's also, yeah, it's like part of me likes it. I'm like, yes, you're finding exactly what I want. But man, my bank account needs a break here. I'm curious too, though, as somebody who is spending so much of your life studying data, having the technology to get answers for things that many people can't see. Are there any questions about consciousness that keep you awake at night, or keeps you curious and excited about what you're doing?
So many questions. Sleep is something that we're very interested in right now. We've talked about a lot about Muse as a meditation tool, but Muse's amazing kind of superpower is helping you fall asleep and fall back asleep. So our latest device, the Muse S Athena, actually tracks your brain as you're falling into sleep and is able to adjust the content in such a way that it guides your brain into sleep. And it's been demonstrated to improve sleep quality by 20%. And what we actually do is we help you move from wakefulness into the hypnagogic state, and then through the hypnagogic state, which is that state where things get kind of trippy as you're falling asleep, you move through that and then into deep sleep. And I actually got off the phone earlier today with a group that I'm working with researchers in Canada and the US and Spain, creating a deep sleep stimulation algorithm. So when you are in deep sleep, it can help you stay in deep sleep by stimulating. With them, we're working on a project with older adults with Alzheimer's and MCI. We do a ton of work in the Alzheimer's and MCI space, both tracking the sleep of individuals with MCI and then using Muse tools. So MCI is mild cognitive impairment. So both tracking sleep and then using Muse tools to help stave off age-related cognitive decline. So I also think a lot about the brain and how it degrades over time, and the things that we can do, like meditation, improving sleep, prefrontal cortex neurofeedback, all of these tools that we can use to strengthen the brain to maintain its function as we age.
So important. I used to say it's my biggest fear, but it's actually, this is ironic. I developed this really deep fear of dementia, and I had it for years. I would think about it every day. And then I stopped being vegan. And I don't know if that's coincidental or not, but that fear lifted. And so, but my grandpa has some dementia. He's there many times, but then you can just see him kind of get lost. And as somebody, like, my favorite thing about myself is my brain. The way I think, that's why I would never change my situation for anybody else's, no matter how much money they have or if they have everything I've ever wanted, because I want to think like me. And so with the meditation, it's really helpful knowing that I'm strengthening the parts of my brain that do decrease the chances of that. But it's so interesting too, the more I find those like pockets of transcendence, it's like I can feel my brain expanding beyond what I thought it was. Like the sort of spiritual idea of being able to receive information that wasn't originally my own is just really fascinating to me. Or even just the idea of what people would call awakening. And I'm curious, as somebody that's from a neuroscience perspective, how do you define awakening in brain terms versus maybe soul terms?
Okay, there is not a good answer for that. This is something that neuroscience has not effectively defined at all. So, I mean, we can look at the information that we have within our own brain, the moving of information from neuron to neuron, the wiring together of neurons that we refer to as learning, the refiring of those neurons that we consider remembering. But how the information that may be outside of oneself can be transferred to or received by the organ of the brain that we currently have is not something that science has it's going to say good answers about. It probably doesn't even have any bad answers about it at the moment. Yeah, it's unfortunately not an area of deep research. There's ways that you can start to think about it. So there's a few theories of consciousness. An old theory of consciousness is the binding theory. So the idea was when you had okay, backing up for a second, we have these things that we call brainwaves. It's the sum total of the electrical activity moving in our heads. So our neurons communicate electrochemically with one another, and then the sum total of that is what we refer to as our brainwaves. When you're in deep sleep, for example, you have most of your brain going in delta activity, and so your whole brain is kind of pulsing in the same beat. And so it becomes easier to transfer information around the brain because it's highly synchronized at that time. There was a theory that was called the binding theory that suggested that gamma activity was like this brainwave that would happen at 40 plus hertz in the gamma range, that when we had that sort of experience, everything that was in our conscious perception at that moment, and our perception at that moment would then become part of our conscious perception. So it's like everything at this sort of flash of a moment was what you became aware of. That has since been debunked, but it leads to a way that we can think about how we might synchronize information between our brain and anything that may be outside of our brain that could receive information. And so that there could be this like a synchronization of our brain activity and activity outside of ourselves that could allow us to take that information in. There's another theory of consciousness around microtubules, and the idea that those microtubules, as they shift and that they move and they resonate at a particular frequency, may be able to bring conscious experience inside the brain, but also potentially resonate with other things that are moving at the same frequency outside. None of these theories have been really properly brought to light and researched, but they're out there.
I kind of like when there's things that are just still unexplained, but I also believe, my relationship with spirituality has just evolved so much over the years. And I really believe that science will always prove spirituality, that just because we have a scientific process or something where we realize, oh, our brainwaves are creating this, I feel like that I see it as the divine design. Like why create everything without a mechanism behind it in general? I'm curious though, as a scientist, do you have a spiritual path that you follow, or how has that evolved through your work?
So I have moved from being, I grew up Jewish. I somehow could never really believe in God, but at moments wanted to. I've moved through being agnostic to actually, as I evolved, both in my spiritual meditation practice and in my scientific understanding, matured in it, I've moved to much more openness to the space of possibility. We truly, truly, truly don't actually know how things work. There are experiences and phenomenon that I've experienced that are not well explained by science, and may someday be. And as scientists, we hope will be, because we really, really are curious about how it works, if it exists. We really want to know. And so I'm, very open to different ways of understanding the connectivity between people and between people in this earth. I certainly, have felt a lot of phenomenon in my life. Like when my aunt died, without knowing that she was passing, I looked at a magazine in the store that happened to be a picture that she had taken. She was a photographer, and it was very weird. I was in Whole Foods and I looked over at a magazine, and there was her photo on the front cover, and I saw a flicker of light at that moment. And I then paid for my stuff at Whole Foods and got into my car and got a text from my cousin that my aunt had passed. And it was like, that existed. There was no question. That was my experience. And I've had a number of similar experiences through my life. So there's a deep sense of connection between us that is not scientifically explained and may never be. And so be it. And so, my spirituality has evolved through my own life and my own experiences, and my desire to connect deeply with others, both in ways that are intellectual, practical, filled with love, emotional, and also something that can't be explained, and something that's deeper than that.
Oh, I love stories like that. I had some pretty phenomenal experiences right after my dad died. Again, like you, both before I actually knew, and then for the several weeks afterwards. And I feel like he was coming to me through my dreams to let me know he was okay, because I was struggling so hard. But what do you hope that people remember more than anything after experiencing your work, and not just Muse, but you?
Oh, I hope they know more than anything that we are all actually totally beautiful, capable, phenomenal, wonderful people who are loved by someone, by the universe, by ourselves. And even if those things don't quite feel true to you right now, even if you want to reject it, like, no, I'm not worthy, no, I'm not great, no, I'm not all those things, actually at your core, you are. And as you erode the thinking that doesn't serve you, that doesn't serve us, the thinking of I'm not good enough and I'm not loved and I'm not worthy and I'm not safe, as we, sweep away those thoughts, at the core, we really do have people who are whole and loved and worthy and safe and, psychologically safe and all of those things. And the experiences that pile up on top of us sometimes convince us that we're not. And we have the ability to come into ourselves and into a sense of being loved and being whole and being worthy and being complete. And that is our truth. And anytime your brain tries to tell you something else and makes you feel shitty for it, it's just a story. And you can let go of that story and drop down into your whole and complete self.
That's so beautiful. I love leaving listeners with one thing, whether it's something to do this week or something to think about this week, to kind of ground this material into their real lives without being overwhelmed. What would you leave them with?
Leave you with the practice of observing your own thoughts. And every time your brain gives you a thought of, I'm not good enough, or I just want to run away, or, ah, you can just sit with it, say, yep, that was a thought, that was a feeling, that's okay. I'm just going to stick with this and go one level deeper. It's okay. I can be here and I can go one level deeper.
So for listeners who are intrigued about you and Muse, where's the best place for them to connect?
You can find me on all the socials at Choose Muse. So Facebook, Instagram, and all the things. And if you're curious about Muse itself, you can go to choosemuse.com, CHOOSEMUSE.com.